Thanks for joining us. Um, I have with me Jennifer Williams, a featured artist in our exhibition season. And I have her here to talk about her latest project, Painting Us Forward. Jennifer was born in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and she's a painter whose work is inspired by patterns in the environment as well as the human form. Currently, her work involves expressive landscape painting and portraiture. She's currently a faculty member at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, and she has also served as an artist teacher through Vermont College of Fine Arts MFA program. Jennifer's work is an expanding art partnership that communicates hope and resilience through the visual storytelling. And the project features painted portraits of small business owners accompanied by their own stories of the impact of COVID-19, its restrictions, especially on their businesses. She paints in an expressive style and is struck by how expressive and communicative eyes are, especially as our masks conceal smiles. She began the paintings during the onset of the pandemic shutdown, realizing the impacts of the social distancing on small businesses. The project is an artistic and empathetic connection and solidarity with her community and includes over 28 portraits. So thank you, Jennifer, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we can just go ahead and start with, maybe you want to talk a bit about Painting Us Forward as a project.
I am really happy to be talking about the Painting Us Forward project in retrospect of the first exhibition at the Pump House. And so this was the first chance to show the paintings. They weren't exhibited before this exhibition. And it's very much at the beginning stages as the pandemic is progressing and everything. We're not out of this. And every time I hear about a local business that shuts down for pandemic related reasons, my heart sinks. And I think about the impact on the community. There was another restaurant that I heard that's closing this week. And so, you know, as one person, you can't really save an entity, but I think you can bring to light what we are experiencing collectively, as well as individually. And so that's one of the reasons why these are individual portraits. Many of the people I haven't met, but they've been kind enough to correspond with me and to send me photographs. Some people I have sat down with and had a conversation. So the story is beginning both there through what they share with me verbally or in writing. And then just that exchange of, you know, looking and painting a portrait. And so these aren't really, they're really not meant to be photorealist in any way, but rather quite expressive, because that's a bit more my style, is to work expressively and play with pattern and color and brushstroke and really take a lot of liberties as far as color, but still connect with who that person is and what their story is about, especially in really challenging times. So I can go on a little bit about this. It's been pretty interesting to see how people have expanded their own opportunities. And so Adrienne owned the Uptown Cafe on the North Side. And she also started this really ambitious and incredible project, 40 Acres and a Mule, which relates quite directly with African-American farmers and access to land to grow sustainable food. And as a chef, she's reaching out and bringing cultural awareness to the culinary community, as well as to the communities where she's lived. And so I admired so much what she did, both with her research and outreach, and certainly through her restaurant, which we all miss. And and she's a very expressive person anyway, so it was very
Mhm.
fun to paint her.
Could you talk about how you went about finding these individuals? Did you know some of them personally, or was it kind of a cold open where you just asked if they were interested?
Oh, lots of cold opens. But I would say too, honestly, where I started, the idea, it wasn't the idea that came first, but more, so with the shutdown, I just started paying people in my family, people who I was, you know, sheltering with. And so just thinking about the people close to me that I might not see for months or maybe a year, which is the case. So I included some of those portraits in the exhibition because I thought they were pretty good and kind of interesting. And I mean, it isn't just one person that tells this really complex story, of course. And so, but I started after that going to different business owners that I knew, and I felt really comfortable talking with them and asking them to be part of the project. And then there were others, and even more that I haven't reached out to yet. That it was, basically an email from someone they didn't know, an artist who wanted to get to know them a little bit, and learn about what they were doing in their business to stay alive, basically, and to sustain their work in spite of a lot of challenges of limited seating or not even being able to be open, and then enforcing COVID protocols. So all those things coming together really shaped this work. And so we met in different places, courtyards.
Thanks.
the-
Thank you.
And I did have a chance too, once folks were vaccinated, and I was too. I had a couple of people join me here in my studio and sit for me. And really, that's my favorite practice, I think, especially like with the family members, as opposed to working from a photograph. There's so much of that direct conversation, that dialogue that comes into the painting, that I think in a way, there's a little something missing in a photograph. I do try to recreate it as best I can from that photo source, though. So the show features, as you indicated, 28 portraits, and I'm expanding the project too. I consider this very much the very beginning stage of it. I also like, even though they're not hung in the gallery 6 feet apart, there is a distance between them, of course, and each is separated by a frame. And so it's like individual to individual. And so I think there's a moment to contemplate and, maybe connect with that person in the way that they were hung, as opposed to installing them maybe in a grid or some other way. So so that really resonated with me too.
On that note, you have a couple dual portraits in your exhibition. Can you talk a bit about those?
Yeah, so those were portraits of people who are in business together. And so they're, in the case of Joe and Tammy and their daughter Sprout, from Pearl Street Brewery, they gave me permission to use a photograph that they've used in a lot of their promotion. But I think one cool thing about that is it's very much a family business. And so their daughter is very much an entertainer, not at all afraid of the stage at all, and quite the opposite. And so it's pretty cool to see her when they have acts in the brewery. You know, sometimes she will be sort of the opening act and singing, and so that's awesome. They also really do, like many of the people that I wanted to focus on, they're also reaching out in the community in a lot of different ways. On the left in this slide with Amy and Georg from Trempealeau Hotel, I thought of how that place is such a destination for people heading up to Perot State Park, or also as a live music venue outdoors. So I think there were some things that they were able to continue during COVID that a place that's more of an indoor venue would have limitations. And, you know, it's not in a populous area, so there's that challenge too. Maybe people aren't necessarily making the trek up there. But on the other hand, maybe they are, you know, more people are getting outside and hiking, and that's a pretty popular spot going or coming from the bike trail. So also Eva and Tim on the right in this slide, they are the owners of Le Chateau. And I think a lot of folks really looked at where would they put their dining dollars as far as that goes. And an elegant French restaurant, a lot of people think might be out of their reach, but I thought it was very creative of Eva and Tim, what they've done with their terrace space. That's actually where I met with them, sat with them, and talked with the two of them, as well as their 4 children were out there with me. And they were able to have meals on the terrace in open air during COVID. So, and they were also able to have limited seating in a space that has separate rooms in the dining rooms at Le Chateau. So they're doing some pretty great things too, expanding their business and opening a bakery. So a lot of really strong efforts on their part.
Speaking of like a life after for these portraits, several of the portraits have masked figures, and so that's a clear indication of the time we're living in with COVID. But how do you see these portraits having a life after? The stories being told by these individuals who aren't masked?
Well, I mean, I think we'll never forget masks, right? They're protecting us, but it's also, you know, it's an encumbrance. And so we'll remember that. And where I talked about the expressiveness of eyes, the masks do allow that. I mean, people are trying to be expressive in other ways. And so maybe being more expressive with their hands as they talk, which I sometimes do, but making eye contact, whereas maybe before folks would shy away from that. So you can't see the full facial expression always, but maybe too, people are speaking a little bit more clearly because they're speaking through a mask. And so I think it maybe represents some change of habits, some good, some bad. I think, you know, we'll have a lot to reflect on when all this is over. But I couldn't make a series of portraits during the pandemic and have them all be unmasked or all be masked, you know, it's kind of for those reasons. So that's a really good question.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Is there anything else in particular you wanted to share with us about your project Painting Us Forward?
You know, I do. There are, I guess there are some things that I have as goals for the continuation of the project. You know, I don't consider myself a portrait painter in terms of how I would categorize my work. It's simply the language that I chose to do this work. And, you know, so that there would be a recognizable face, maybe not a 100% faithful likeness, but quite close to the characteristics of that person. I also really want to expand so that I can include in the project greater diversity as our community reflects that. So that really is very important to me. And there are businesses that I've started reaching out to fulfill that goal. And I probably will paint a few people a couple times as you see in this show. So yes.
Well, wonderful. Thank you again for joining us, Jennifer. And for those of you who haven't seen the exhibition, it is open until the 11th. So thank you.
Thanks so much.